Welcome to this HerdMASTER training video. My name's Damien and this is Getting Around HerdMASTER. First things first, you'll notice up the top here we have the stud version, what the version number is, which database we're actually working on, and what breed we're currently working on. Down the bottom of the screen here you'll see the user who's logged in, so if you have multiple different logins for your database, that's where they are. Working on property, and it'll tell you your property and your location. Now, moving over to the far right, you'll see a button here which allows you to quickly change which property you're currently working on. Central Sync if you use our cloud-based sync server. The contact list, animal list, data entry, view edit. Now, data entry and view edit are a little bit different to most other buttons here in that they'll open up a panel with tabs on it so that you can do data entry for traits, weights, procedures, preg tests and movements. Same with view edit, it'll have a few of the view edit windows. Crush side recorder, that'll open up the crush side recorder if you use it. Site options, quick way to get to your site options as shown earlier, and you can exit the program. Now up in the top menu, up in File, I've obviously got Central Server on, so I've got my Central Server options there. Backup data, restore data. So that's where I can back up my whole database and restore a whole database. So if you're going to do something big, I recommend backing up, do the big thing, and then see if it works. If it doesn't work, you can always restore to your data just before you've made those changes. You can change your password, so whatever user you're logged in as, you can just click there and change your password. Log out and exit. Now, normally these do pretty much the same thing. They exit from the program. The difference is if you've got HerdMaster to automatically log into your database, log out will tell it, okay, next time I start the program, I want to come to the login screen where I choose which database I use. Whereas exit will just exit the program, won't change anything. So typically, when you're working in HerdMaster, if you want to enter data, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be done under the data entry windows. So you'll see a few things on here like darting record, which is for South Africa only, obviously, for game species. And you'll see a few things in my database that you may not have access to on yours. And here we can go to the crush side recording tool. So that's exactly the same as the button over on this side of the screen. Action template, weights, traits, procedures, preg test movements. You can enter data for all of these things all through here. Now, one thing to remember, embryo flushes are just when you've flushed an animal and how many embryos you got. It is not how many embryos are viable, and it's not your embryo inventory. That's actually in the view edit screen, in embryo inventory, and that's where you create your embryos for implanting or selling. And that's a very cool feature that we'll go through in a later training video, or you can see it on the support site under the matings. There should be a whole section there on embryos. You've also got a semen inventory here where you can create semen. So you can enter data into these and then use them in, well, in your data entry mating screen. You could use your semen. Embryo flushes, that just views the flushes entered in here. We've got a bunch of options all through here. Under the Animals tab, you have your animal list, add animals, add calves, mob list, which hasn't been implemented in this version. Bulk add animals, that's commercial, so all the animals will have identical details to each other. So if you put in a sire and dam, all the animals that you enter will have the exact same sire and dam. Bulk add animals stud, that allows you to bulk add animals, choosing what information you want to enter, or importing it from a file. Multi-sire groups, that allows you to create your multi-sire groups and change them, and then you can update your sires from DNA testing. So you can actually create calves against multi-sires, and then update the correct sire on that calf later on. Contacts, well, that just shows you a list of all your contacts. That'll include yourself. Usually in HerdMaster, the owner and breeder is a contact called owner. Reports. HerdMASTER has over 150 built-in reports, so there are a hell of a lot here. In nearly 3 years of working here, there's probably a few that I still have yet to go through. Again, you'll see a few here, like Swakara traits, which are South African sort of aimed. There is also the custom reporter, which allows you to build up your own reports. Down the bottom here, underneath this line, you actually have submissions. So they are reports, and you can print them out for your own information, but this is where you'd send in your regos, send in your cancellations, do your breed plan weights and traits, DTC mating data, carcass data, you can send that in as well. There's also a completeness of performance comparison, and you can calculate your recording dates as well. So these ones right down the bottom here are treated a little bit differently to these, in that you'll have options to send these to breed plan directly from the report. Now, we will go through those a little bit later. NLAS, this is your NLAS menu. In New Zealand, that will read NATE, and in Canada, CCNA, I believe. View Edit Tag Bucket. So you can view all your tags that you have imported into the system. Import your tag bucket, so you can import that directly from NLAS. Just be aware, if you have been going for a while, you will get pretty much every tag you've ever had. So I usually recommend, if you are getting tags from a supplier, if you're getting the matched ear tags with the RFID, then I would give them a bell and see if they can supply you a file with the electronic ID, the national ID, which is what's written on the outside of the tag, and the management tag that's matched with it. Most of your suppliers will be able to supply you with a file that just tells you what tags you've bought anyway, so you can always bring them in. Submit movements, so you can submit your movements to NLAS directly from here, and you can do that from your sales table or your movements table, or manually. So it's very easy to use that to send in data to NLAS saying it's moving from this pick to this pick on this date, here's the authorization. NLAS ID audit. So you can do that audit on your animal tag, your electronic ID, or your national ID. What you would do is you would choose whatever is correct, and we will go through that and this whole section a little bit later. The audit basically looks at the information on your animal, and you select what is correct, and it looks at information on your animal or on your tags, matches it up to your animals, and will highlight in orange what isn't correct or what it thinks isn't correct, and highlights in green what is correct. And so this way you can very quickly say, hey, actually, you know, I've updated the electronic ID on this animal, but I haven't actually updated the national ID on it. And doing an audit, you would choose whatever the information is that's correct, so in this case the electronic ID, and it would go through your tag bucket, find that electronic ID, check the national ID on that animal, and check the suggested animal tag to that animal. And if either of those other two don't match, it will come up orange, and you can just check it and update it. Submit retags. So if you've retagged animals in HerdMaster, you can actually just quite easily submit from and to date, and that'll just go to NLAS, and it'll say, hey, this old tag is no longer functional, here's the new tag. And that way you can keep yourself minimal work for when you get an EU audit. Setup menu has a lot of data in it, so I'll just brush over these. Breed-specific codes, so as you can see, you've got a bunch of those. They shouldn't need much editing. Generally, we have those set up for you when you choose your breed. Treatments, so you can set up your own treatments, your treatment codes, treatment types. So I could set up a type called vaccinations, and then in treatment codes I could give it a 7-in-1. And you can also put in your withholding periods and export limitations. And if you set up batches, you can actually set up, you know, price per unit for a particular batch. So treatment templates and administration methods. Administration methods are just for information when you're out in the yards. You can have it so that, A, your farmhands know that it's an oral administration. Treatment templates are used with the crush side recorder. So they're basically groups of treatments that you will do at different times in animals' lives or at different runs through the crush. And let's say you've got a weaning treatment template. That'd be treatments that you give to animals at weaning, and when you're running Crash Side Recorder, you can just bring up the weaning treatment template, and it'll bring up all the treatments that you've got listed in there. Traits, very similar. Set up trait codes, set up trait templates, and standard ABRI traits. So trait codes, you can make your own. You can make any trait you want. Set up trait templates, again, that's for the Crash Side Recorder, so on a particular run through, you'll see a particular set of traits that you want to record against. Standard ABRI traits. Now this is where it gets interesting. So let's say you have temperament and you've recorded it as temp. When you go to submit your breed plan data, you can tell it to include extra traits for recording. So let's continue with the example of temperament. So let's say you've got a trait code called temp. You would then go into the standard ABRI traits and change those so that when breed plan tries to send in temperament, it knows to use your trait code that you've recorded on animals called temp. And you just assign your standard, this is a list of standard ABRI traits that we record for different breeds. And in temperament, you just find whatever you've recorded it as and pop it in. Properties. So you can set up properties or property sites. Set up properties is your actual property. Set up property sites, that's your paddocks within each property. So you can set up multiple properties, put pick numbers on them, everything like that. When you do movements, and if you submit those movements to NLAS from the movements table and a property has a pick on it, it will grab that pick. Database, configure database. This shouldn't be used very often. Obviously I've got central server info. Licensed modules here. This tells me what modules I have switched on. Users, so you can set up users and what properties those users have access to. So if you've got 4 properties, you could set up a user that only has access to one of them. They'll never be able to see animals on the other properties. Or, you know, you could have a manager who does 2 properties and they have access to both those properties but none of the others, etc., etc. And you can set up your usernames and passwords in there. Animal groups, so that's your group codes. To be honest, they're not used very much anymore. They're mostly a holdover from HerdMASTER days. And those can be used in your group code 1, 2, 3, or 4 on the animals. Contact groups. So you can make groups for contacts to belong to. So you could make a group in here, say agents, and have all the agents belong to that group. You can then make filters to look at all of that. Performance groups. Now this is quite important. Performance groups are your breed plan management groups basically. So if you've treated a group of animals differently to your main herd, so let's say you had 10 animals that were a bit crook and you kept them apart from the herd on better grass, on feed, gave them doses of medicine, whatever, then that's where you would change your performance group. If you want to know more, contact TBTS or SBTS or whoever your representative is at Breed Plan, and they'll be able to explain your breed plan management groups in more detail. Now, your management groups, these are used elsewhere. And again, it's a bit of a holdover, so you don't need to worry too much about that one. RFID and scale devices. This is where you can set up devices to connect to Crash Side Recorder, and you can set the data bits, parity, stop bits, flow control, what character to send when you hit the wait button, etc., etc. These are all built in. You can add more or you can modify these ones. 9 times out of 10, these ones are the ones that will work. Unfortunately, there's no getting around knowing some of this for particular devices. Okay, way graph templates. So you can set up how the graphs work and have different way graphs, and this is displayed on your animal details, and you can set up what time periods to do that in. Action templates, as I said earlier, that's a way of entering data on the fly so that you can do weights, traits, and treatments all on the animals at one for each row, rather than having to do data entry weights, then data entry traits, then data entry procedures. Just a word on procedures. Procedures and treatments, the two terms are interchangeable in HerdMaster. Filtering, so you can set up your filters, your animal filters and contact filters. Worksheets, you can set up worksheets or look at worksheets. That's also where you can make worksheets inactive. Making worksheets inactive is really handy because it doesn't delete them from the system, but they just stop appearing in the worksheet drop-downs so that you get a cleaner experience. Reminders. If you've got reminders switched on, you can view all reminders or just reminders for today. And auto-calculate grade rules. So if your society uses grading, let's say you've got animal with grade A, bred with animal grade B, then the calf would be animal grade C or something like that. So you can set up automated rules so that it will work out what the animal grade should be. Now, if we go up to utilities, this is where you get a bit more advanced stuff, particularly under advanced. You've got execute support script. So if we build a script for you, that's where you run it. Check trait integrity. That basically goes through the traits that are built into your breed and make sure that they're under the correct name. View frame score table. Reset demo data. Obviously useful when you're messing around with the demo data. Copy default ID to national ID. If you've accidentally put all your national IDs, so the number written on the outside of your RFID, into the default ID of animals, then you can copy it out and into the correct area. Same with the electronic ID, or copying from national ID to electronic ID and back again. Convert trait code to weight. So if you've got a particular trait code that was a weight, you've imported it through the universal file importer, then it may have gone in under the wrong trait code. Let's say you've recorded a trait called T or W, and in fact it's supposed to be a weight. You can actually convert it there. Clear all system notes. That just clears out all the notes. Clear invalid dates. Occasionally you will get weird issues with dates that have gone a bit squiffy, particularly if you're an Australian running with the US date format, because you will get month, then day, then year running in the background. And if HerdMaster is trying to look at it as day, then month, it'll get freaked out. Flatten sales, so that just flattens your sales table, makes it all a bit simpler. Clean tag bucket national IDs, so that'll just go through your tag bucket and clear out the national IDs from all the tags. Remove rego status suffix from society IDs. So if you've got a bunch of society IDs that tell you if it's fully registered or if it's calf registered or whatever, and it's on the end of your society ID, you can actually just strip those off. Remove outdate from AI mating. So if you've been doing matings the old way and you accidentally had an outdate on there, you can just strip that out. Date calculator. So you can put in a particular date, number of days, and it'll tell you what the date is after. Worksheet generator. This is interesting because it can go through and it can basically generate a worksheet based off a filter. Select animals, put them over on the worksheet. You can also say animal has to be a certain amount of age, between a range of age in days, or has to have last calved, last weighed obs code. So if you only wanted animals where they were last weighed at W2 or something like that, you could pop that in there. Last mated within a certain range, or last mated to a particular animal. You can also, when you're using a filter or you've got any of these, you can also tell it, okay, I want the worksheet based on the dams and size, last calf or all calves. So you can build up a worksheet, a complex worksheet, fairly quickly from other information there. Imports. So saltbush import. So if somebody else has got HerdMaster and they've exported animals, you can just import them here. There's a few files that you will be able to use this for, but you probably won't come across them too often unless you know somebody else who's using HerdMaster. Data from device, plug-and-play devices. Unfortunately, very few scale indicators actually used plug-and-play, which was a system for connecting automatically to devices. So manual devices, it does only have older devices in here, and you can tell it what COM port it's on and hit next, and it should come up with a session table. Now, the reason it's only got older devices in here is because standards kept changing for how to do this, and we couldn't afford to keep changing everything for every different device. Universal File Import Utility. This is what you'll use more times than data from device. You'll export from your scale into a format, and then you'll set up templates in here so that it can read those files and it knows which column is what data, that sort of stuff. HerdMaster Pocket you don't need to know about. That was a mobile device on the old Windows CE versions. Generally not used much anymore. ABRI imports. So if you get files from ABRI, like EBVs, here's where you import it. And you can get quite a few files from ABRI and MVPs. And that's where you import your MVPs. Export to device. So again, this tries to push information out to a device. Again, it only works on older devices or devices that use those communications methods. So it was left to one side, similar to data from device. Sales catalog, so you can export a mail merge from HerdMaster either as a CSV file or as a Word mail merge. And you can choose what information and where to put it and set up a template. And whenever you do your sales catalogs, you can always just select that template. Or if you do export it to a CSV, you can then use that CSV with Adobe InDesign or other print media programs and create your own sales catalog. HerdMaster Pocket, again, not used much anymore. Beef CRC information. So that'll just build up a report into a CSV file, and you can send that to the Beef CRC. Contacts mail merge, so you can send everybody an email, basically, or a written letter done in Word, and this will basically do a mail merge on your contact list. So if I just go in there, you can actually select your contacts and do a mail merge to them, so send them all one letter. You can also use filters, your contact filters, as we mentioned earlier, and contact worksheets to limit that list. You can export your pedigrees, and that's just a list of your pedigrees of particular animals. It's not massively informative. Animals, you can export animals, and you can choose your details, filter on the animals, and exclude notes and treatments. If you don't want people seeing that you've written down that a particular animal was being troublesome, or if you don't want to send everybody all the treatment information that you've ever given them. Otherwise, this will send all the details. If they've got HerdMaster, they can use the Saltbush import, as we saw earlier, to import those files, and they will come into their database with all their information. So no typing needed. And that's really useful for transferring animals between two properties or two businesses that both have HerdMaster. Recalculate, very useful area. So you can recalculate your animal procedure costs. So let's say you've changed what a procedure costs in the system for a particular batch. That will go through and recalculate exactly how much each procedure cost. Procedure batch inventory usage. So that will go through and look at all the procedures or treatments that you've given an animal and what batches were used for that, and it will go through and recalculate how much is left. Inbreeding coefficients, so you can work out how inbred each animal is or potential matings. There is a report that does look at that. This is only accurate to what you have in HerdMaster. So if you are looking for something particularly accurate, I would use the online one that is with your society, as, like I said, this is only using what you've got in HerdMaster. So let's say you go back, one generation beyond all the animals that you own. Well, you've only got that information one generation back. Some of them might have been related further back than that, and so your inbreeding is going to be off. Recalculate breed codes. This is generated in a very particular way, and that will go through and recalculate using the standard HerdMaster format of what your breed codes should be. Breed percentage by pedigree. So there is an area on each animal which is breed percentage, and you can put in anything in there. So you could actually just put in your animal lines, and that'll work out. It'll go back through your pedigree animals, find out, what percentage of what breed they are, and then pull that information down through their progeny. And breed percentage by breed code, if you are using standard breed codes, it should be able to work out a rough breed percentage based on your codes. Animal IDs, so you can recalculate your society ID, your tattoo, your suffix based on that. Frame scores, you can recalculate your frame scores. Recalculate your birth years. That's useful if you have changed birth years using Universal File Import utility, or if you've imported new animals with the Universal File Import utility, because it will not calculate birth years automatically. So you just recalculate once you're done. Parent-sibling marbling scores and animal C values. Bulk change. You can bulk change your mating groups, performance groups, animal tags. So, if you've got a bunch of animal tags that are old, for example, we could go in here. Let's say we've got these ones, and let's say they were all born in 86, and we wanted to just put that in there because they're dead animals or something like that. We can just pop that in, and we can tell it to update the default ID as well. In this case, default ID means society ID. So, and off it goes from there. You can also remove things from the beginning and replace the beginning, replace the end, that sort of stuff. You can also clear your electronic IDs off your animals, bulk change your observation codes, bulk fail matings, and bulk change last progeny and all progeny of a group of animals. Invoicing. So this is where you can use HerdMaster similar to a point of sales device. So you can create a sales list of all the animals you're going to sell on a particular day. You can then view the list and put prices on them and sell them and put them on an invoice, have tax on it, everything like that, and you can view raised invoices. Animal pictures. This just allows you to remove all your picture links or change your picture paths, because HerdMaster doesn't store the actual picture. Otherwise your database would get very big very, very quickly. All it does is it stores a location where a picture is kept, and if that location changes, you can bulk change it here, or if you don't want the pictures in HerdMaster, you can just remove them. Weight ratios. So weight ratios are a very useful item. It basically calculates, so let's say you've got a weaning weight of 250 kilos, 300 kilos, whatever. What this will do is, with enough weights in the system, it can look at that and say, well, how old was it on that day? And work out, if it was exactly 205 days old, what its weight would have been if it was exactly that age. And what it'll do is it'll go through and do that for all your animals. You do need to be recording birth weights, so we'll just mention that, because otherwise it throws it out. And it will go through, it will look at all those weights, and then it will rank them. So if you've got 3 animals and it's adjusted for what they would have weighed if they were exactly the same age, and it can rank them. So if you've got an animal that comes through the yard and you look at him and you go, oh, he's a bit weedy, but he's actually a bit younger than the others and he's developing better, this can tell you that. You can also clear your adjusted weights and ratios. And your adjusted weights and ratios are available on the actual animal themselves, and there's a couple of reports that use them. Visual Farm, this isn't used very much. It does have issues with Windows 10 sometimes, but you can set up a visual representation of your farm and put your paddocks in and then do movements between paddocks. You can also view the paddock density. That's actually what I find most useful. Windows. Now, I will just touch on this. This is a really useful area. If I have a few windows open, all the windows that are open will be listed here, and you can switch between them. So if you've got a ton of windows open, they will all be listed here. And if you wanted to close all of them and get back to the original area, you can just hit close. Help menu. So I wouldn't worry too much about the contacts and the index. They only have brief information. The majority of our data is on our website on the support page. There's a ton of tip sheets on there. Check for updates. That'll manually look for an update to HerdMaster. About. Now this is a useful screen. It shows all the licensed modules, your expiry date, your customer reference number, and you can update your licenses here. And you can pop in your customer reference number. Would go in this field just here. Your name would just go in here, and you just hit get license, and that would update your license. So if you've just paid and you've gotten your receipt and you wanted to update it, you could just come in here and do that. And that is the end of this video. Thank you for watching.